Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. By now, everybody has heard about the concept of work-life balance and specifically about separating the two, the domain of work and the workplace and your personal life. There are many reasons why this continues to be one of the most important topics of conversation in today's world. First and foremost, there is the idea of culture and what is acceptable and expected culturally in terms of where work ends and our personal lives begin. And of course, technology plays an important role here too. We have more and more technological advances that allow us to remain connected to our workplace, which in itself makes it that much more difficult to disconnect and separate work from our non-work lives. Another thing to consider is the potential increased difficulty of separating work and non-work for those who work from home. That can make the lines even that much more blurry. Something that can be helpful in separating the work domain from the non-work domain is having an established transition process or transition ritual. And that applies to both transitioning from the home domain or personal life domain into the work domain, just as it applies for transitioning from work to the non-work domain. So what are these processes or rituals that will aid with the transition from one domain to the other? Basically, these are habits or behaviors or processes that we define individually as a transition from one to the other. So whether that's in the morning when you head into work or at the end of the day when you're finished with your job and you're heading home. What's important here is that you have a well-defined process, something that definitely signifies to you a transition period from one domain to the other. So whether you call that a transition process or a transition ritual or rituals, whatever works for you, make sure that this is clear and well established for you in your own mind and in your own experience, because this is where it's going to be most beneficial. As you consider transition processes or rituals, you may discover that the same rituals or processes will be as effective or as beneficial for both the work to home transition as well as from the home to work transition. One of the simplest ways of officially transitioning from one to the other is by changing clothes. For example, in the morning when you get ready for work, you put on the kinds of clothes that you would wear for work. And at the end of the day, you would change again into the kinds of clothes that you would wear outside of work. And while many people end up wearing the same clothes for the entire day, this may be more significant for those of you who may be required to wear business wear or uniform of some sort that you would otherwise not wear in your personal life. But even if you don't have to wear a uniform or be dressed up for a business environment, you can still make that determination whether you change out your outfit completely or just one or two articles of clothing that to you definitely signifies the change from one domain to the other. So that's a very simple yet productive and significant way of transitioning from one domain to the other. Something else that could be helpful in the defining of a transition process or ritual is something like working out, whether you go to the gym to work out or whether you work out outside or even at home. You could make that a very specific transition period, whether that's in the morning or whether that's in the afternoon or after work. It can work for both transitional periods as long as you make that into a habit and define it as part of your transitioning from one domain to the other. Taking your dog for a walk, whether that's before going to work or after going home from work, or both, is another great way of defining a transitional period or a transition ritual for switching from one domain to the other. Some people may choose to have some quiet time when transitioning from one period to the other, whether that means simply closing your eyes, maybe meditating for a few minutes, maybe doing some breathing exercises, whatever works for you. You can even do something like that in your car. And again, this will work in either direction, whether you're transitioning from home to work or from work to home. Either way will work. But that's another great way of establishing a well-defined transition period. Along similar lines, you can also take a few minutes to set intentions of what you want to do or how you want to experience the domain that you're going into, whether that's going into work or whether that's going into your personal life domain after work. If you take a few minutes to have a quiet moment, a few quiet moments, you could use that time to set intentions for how you want your time that's coming up in this domain to turn out. So this is another way of transitioning from one domain to another, but at the same time setting some intentions of what you would like that time there to turn out to be like, what you would like to accomplish, what you would like to experience. So this is so easy but so effective. I highly encourage you to give that one a try. You could also have a standard checklist that you go through before you switch to the next domain. In the morning, that could be things that you are checking off before leaving the house. And of course, at the end of your workday, those could be things that are work-related that you're checking off before leaving work, whether that's reorganizing your work done, to-do list, things that need to be done tomorrow, turning off certain computers or printers or whatever the case may be. Even something as simple as turning off the lights or turning off the coffee machine. You can get really creative, but it can be productive not only within that particular domain, but also be helpful in the transition period, helping you to better define a transition procedure or ritual. You could use your commute for the purpose of listening to different things such as audiobooks or podcasts or even music. And you could listen to one type of audio, whether that's podcasts or books or music, when you're on your way to work, and a different type of audio when you are on the way home. So maybe on your way to work, you listen to things that are more serious or more news related or technology related or work related. And on your way home during that transition period, you could listen to things that are more casual or more fun, more carefree. So again, it's up to you, but you could use your commute time as a transition period while listening to things that get you more into the mindset of whichever domain you're transitioning into. And if you work from home and you don't really have much of a commute, you could still set aside some time, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, it doesn't have to be very long, to sit down and still listen to some kind of audio that will get you into the right mindset, whether you're transitioning into the work domain or into your personal domain after work. You can still use that particular method to help you with the transitioning ritual. As you can see, there are some very simple things that everybody can do, that everybody can incorporate into their daily experience to help them transition from one domain to the other, therefore allowing you for much cleaner, more defined, easier separation of work and your personal life. And this continues to be a topic of conversation because we have collectively such a hard time of separating the two. Whether you're struggling with technology keeping you connected to your work at all times, or whether this is a cultural issue where you're expected to be connected to work at all times, or a combination of both, there are definitely things that everyone can do to create a ritual, a transition procedure, something that will officially take you from one domain to the other, making it easier to separate the two. This is something that will take some practice. It's something that should be done every day whenever transitioning in either direction. And it's something that may take a little bit of time to refine and make it most productive for you individually. But it's definitely worth the time and the effort. If you can successfully separate work from non-work, then you can be your best within each domain without the other domain taking over and interrupting. And while there may still be some bleed-throughs in either direction, it should not be such that it interferes with your performance and your ability to do your work or your ability to enjoy your personal life, which makes an official transition period a very important part of our daily experience. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. The topic of work-life balance is not a new one, but it's also one that's not going away, and there's a reason for that. People continue to struggle separating the work domain from the personal life domain, and that may interfere both with work and with the personal life and being able to enjoy and be successful in either domain, which makes it that much more important that we figure out how to separate the two. And while some bleed through may still exist, we each have the responsibility of clearly defining the two domains as separate and having a way of transitioning between the two. So this is what this episode was about, having that transition procedure or ritual that will help you to transition from one domain to the other. And as you listened to the episode, you found out that some of the very same rituals can be used to transition from home to work and then again from work to home. So you can come up with something that works in either direction when it comes to transitioning from one domain to the other. Simple things such as changing clothes or engaging in some kind of physical activity such as a workout or walking your dog can be very helpful. Focusing on things like checklists or turning on or off certain appliances or electronics can also be of help. Quiet time for meditating or setting intentions is a great way of transitioning from one domain to the other. Listening to things like audiobooks or podcasts or even music can be a great way of getting you into the right mindset, whether that's going to work or going home, as long as you choose the right audio to get you into the mindset that will benefit you the most in the domain into which you're transitioning. As the week unfolds, I invite you to consider how you separate your work domain from your personal life domain, and whether or not you have a transition ritual or transition procedure. And if you don't, what kind of things could you do to define that transition period so that you can better separate the two domains and make your experience in each domain that much more productive and enjoyable. For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel where you can find the podcast in a video version. The link for that is in the description below. In addition to the video version of this podcast, my YouTube channel also contains videos that focus on stress management, so I invite you to check that out. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.